They tried again to kill me, not with sanctions, not with diplomatic pressure, but with a drone. Flying at 2,000 feet, carrying 2 Hellfire missiles, it loitered above our convoy as I traveled from Ouagadougou to a military base in the north of Burkina Faso. 17 days ago, I should have died. The alert came from our newly installed Chinese radar system, technology NATO claimed we did not need. In seconds, we diverted onto a rough, unpredictable route. 4 minutes later, missiles struck exactly where we would have been. 3 innocent civilians were killed, casualties of an assassination attempt that was not aimed at them, but at me. I stand before you now not as someone who survived by luck, but as someone prepared. This is not speculation or conspiracy. We have the radar data, the missile fragments, and electronic signatures that prove targeting. What would you do if a superpower tried to take your life for demanding respect, for refusing submission? Could one person's survival ignite a movement? Could one nation's courage inspire an entire continent? Stay with us, because this story isn't just shocking. It's a lesson in courage, sovereignty, and African freedom. Subscribe and stand with us for a continent that will never bow again. 17 days ago, a NATO MQ-9 Reaper drone flew above the roads of Burkina Faso, its payload of Hellfire missiles locked onto my convoy. The missiles were precise, American-made AGM-114s, designed to strike moving vehicles. The night was dark, the road desolate, 40 kilometers from the nearest town. Our small convoy of 3 vehicles, 12 personnel in total, seemed vulnerable. In that moment, death felt inevitable. Our security chief received the alert. The Chinese radar system we had insisted on installing, the one the West said we didn't need, had detected an unidentified aircraft loitering directly above our route. It was not passing by, not patrolling. It was waiting. 17 minutes tracking. Course adjusted 3 times, my chief reported. This is targeting. The decision had to be made in seconds. Divert now. Follow a secondary path through rougher terrain, slower, riskier, but unpredictable. Every heartbeat counted. 4 minutes later, 2 Hellfire missiles struck our original path, obliterating the road where we would have been. 3 innocent lives were lost. Amadou Dio, a 43-year-old father of 5 transporting goods. Fatimato, 28, a teacher visiting her sick mother. And Ibrahim Traoré, 16, a student helping with deliveries to earn school fees. Their lives, ordinary and invaluable, ended because the world's most powerful military had decided I must die. The evidence was undeniable. Missile fragments recovered, analyzed in our military laboratory, and verified by independent experts from China and Russia. Confirmed the precision strike. Electronic signature data proved the missiles adjusted their course to track our convoy specifically. This was no accident, no targeting error. It was an assassination attempt. Fear coursed through me that night. My hands shook, my heart raced, my mind calculated every contingency. But fear was information. Courage was acting despite it. I gave the order to divert. I chose life over routine, survival over complacency. And in doing so, I lived. This night was not just about survival. It was a lesson in vigilance, preparation, and sovereignty. The drone that tried to end my life became the spark that would ignite a continental awakening. Because if I could survive, then African leaders could resist. If one man could outsmart the deadliest technology on the planet, then nations could reclaim autonomy. This is the reality of leadership in Africa. One wrong move, one ignored warning, and death comes swiftly. But it is also the reality of hope. With preparation, with courage, with determination, survival is possible. The story of that night, of 3 innocent lives lost, and one man who refused to be silenced, is the beginning of something larger. A movement that will not bow to intimidation, that will not fear power, that will not surrender sovereignty. The moment I survived the drone strike, I knew the real battle had only just begun. Survival was one thing, but exposing the truth was another. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I convened an emergency meeting with my Security Council. Military commanders, intelligence chiefs, and closest advisors. On the table lay the radar data, communications intercepts, missile fragments, and electronic signatures proving targeting. One of my generals said, "This is an act of war. We must respond militarily." I refused. The West expected that. They wanted justification to frame us as aggressors. No, we would respond strategically. We would expose them publicly, with evidence they could not deny. By sunrise, I addressed the nation live, unscheduled, without prior warning to foreign embassies. The drone, the missiles, the targeting, the deaths of 3 innocent civilians, all lay bare for every citizen to see. Within hours, the video had 10 million views. Within a day, 50 million. Within a week, over 200 million people had witnessed an African president accuse NATO of attempted assassination, with undeniable evidence. The reaction was explosive. Western powers were unprepared for transparency, unprepared for proof. NATO issued a vague statement, denying involvement, but never denying drone operations or missile use. They could not deny the truth. This exposure had immediate and unprecedented consequences. 17 African nations issued statements of support, condemning NATO's actions, demanding investigation, and insisting on accountability. The African Union convened an emergency session, passing resolutions for transparency in all NATO operations across the continent. One by one, countries began demanding NATO's departure. Mali expelled French forces. Niger terminated security agreements. Chad closed Western military bases. The failed assassination had triggered a domino effect, weakening the control that the West had assumed as permanent. The lesson was clear. Truth is power. Evidence is authority. Survival alone is not enough. Documentation and exposure transform personal survival into collective strength. NATO may have missed its target, but in doing so, it exposed its own vulnerability and injustice. It showed Africa that no leader is beyond attack, but also that resistance, preparedness, and public revelation can shift the balance of power. This is what African news rarely reports, that survival and transparency can inspire unity and resistance, that one man's exposure can reshape continental security and sovereignty, that one failed strike, when documented and shared, can awaken an entire continent. And it did. The story of survival became the story of African defiance, proving that power is not in the weapons that kill, but in the courage to survive and the will to reveal the truth. The survival of one leader quickly became a spark for many. Within 72 hours of publicly exposing the assassination attempt, African nations began reaching out. President Gita of Mali called my personal line at 2 in the morning. "Brother," he said, "they tried to kill you. They'll try to kill me next. We need to talk." For 3 hours, we discussed sovereignty, survival, and the price of independence. The African Sovereignty Defense Initiative was born, not through formal treaties, not with lawyers drafting documents, but through the shared understanding of leaders who refused to be controlled. 12 nations joined immediately: Mali, Niger, Chad, Guinea, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, Tanzania, Central African Republic, Sudan, Mauritania, Congo, and Equatorial Guinea. Each understood the same truth. If NATO would attempt to assassinate one president for demanding respect, they would do the same to any of us. This coalition was built on shared responsibility and collective defense. If one member nation is attacked, all respond. If a leader is targeted, the response is continental. If civilians are killed, the evidence will be preserved, publicized, and defended. We created a network of integrated radar systems, Chinese-made, connected across borders to detect unauthorized flights and share alerts in real time. If a drone crosses into Burkina Faso, Niger, or Chad airspace, every member nation knows immediately. Shared intelligence became our lifeline. Every plot, every suspicious movement, every financial transfer from foreign operatives is analyzed collectively. When Niger detected unusual activity 2 months later, foreign operatives meeting opposition figures and transferring money, we coordinated a response that prevented a coup before it could begin. This is the strength of unity. Alone, these nations might have been vulnerable, but together, their combined awareness and rapid response make assassination and destabilization exponentially harder. But defense is not just military. The initiative established economic resilience to withstand sanctions and aid cuts. Alternative trade agreements, financial mechanisms independent of Western systems, and a sovereignty defense fund protect member nations from economic retaliation. When Mali expelled French forces and aid was cut, the fund replaced it. When Niger terminated security agreements and EU assistance was frozen, the fund filled the gap. Sovereignty is not only defended by missiles, but also by independence in economy and decision-making. This coalition is not theoretical. It is operational. It is proof that African nations, united and prepared, can survive and resist external pressures. The failed assassination attempt, intended to kill one leader, instead birthed a network of 12 fearless nations committed to collective security and sovereignty. One leader's survival became a catalyst for continental action, turning fear into power and vulnerability into resilience. Survival alone was not enough. We knew that when assassination fails, economic pressure follows. When drones miss, sanctions hit. When missiles fail, aid is cut. We had to create resilience at every level. The African Sovereignty Defense Initiative became more than a military alliance. It became a comprehensive shield, military, economic, and informational. First, integrated air defense systems were deployed across member nations. Chinese radar systems, the same technology that had detected the drone targeting me, were installed and networked continent-wide. When an unidentified aircraft enters Burkina Faso airspace, Niger is alerted. When suspicious patterns appear over Chad, Guinea knows. Every member nation shares data in real time. Intelligence is collective, immediate, and actionable. Second, shared economic mechanisms were established to withstand Western retaliation. The Sovereignty Defense Fund pools contributions from member nations based on GDP. It provides emergency support to any nation facing economic coercion, sanctions, frozen aid, or restricted market access. When Mali expelled French forces and aid was cut, The fund replaced it. When Niger terminated security agreements and European assistance was frozen, the fund stepped in. By reducing dependence, we ensured that survival was not just physical, but financial as well. Third, military capabilities were enhanced collectively. Advanced defense systems, electronic warfare tools, cyber defense protocols, and anti-aircraft missiles were acquired collaboratively. Joint training exercises and shared doctrines ensured coordinated responses. An attack on one nation is now an attack on all 12, raising the cost of intervention beyond what any external power can easily manage. Fourth, narrative power became central. Control of information has always defied global perception. Western media dictated the story about Africa, shaping which leaders were legitimate and which crises mattered. The initiative invested in Pan-African news networks, continental social media platforms, and alternative channels to disseminate truth directly. Every drone strike, every assassination attempt, every act of aggression is documented, preserved, and shared. The story of my survival alone has been viewed over 200 million times because we bypassed traditional media gatekeepers. By building resilience across military, economic, and informational domains, we ensured that African nations would no longer be at the mercy of external powers. Survival became systemic. Threats from drones, missiles, sanctions, and propaganda now meet preparation, unity, and transparency. The failed assassination that was meant to kill me transformed into a blueprint for African resistance, showing that a continent can defend itself not only through courage, but through infrastructure, strategy, and solidarity. This is the new reality. Africa survives, Africa resists, and Africa builds its own path. One failed strike did not weaken us. It made us stronger, more prepared, and more united than ever before. The battle for Africa is not only fought in the skies or on the ground. It is fought in the minds and hearts of people. The African Evidence Archive became the cornerstone of our strategy. Every strike, every casualty, every violation, every attempted assassination is meticulously documented. 473 drone strikes across Burkina Faso over the past decade. 214 civilian deaths. 17 attempts on African leaders, each recorded, verified, and stored securely across the continent. This is power in evidence. We created a media network independent of Western control. Pan-African news channels, social media platforms, and information outlets ensure that truth reaches every citizen without censorship. The failed assassination attempt on me was broadcast to millions directly. Traoré, Burkina Faso, became a household name worldwide, symbolizing resistance and courage. This is why NATO panicked, not because we accused them, but because we proved it with undeniable evidence. African news now tells the story Western media ignored. That one man's survival ignited a continent-wide awakening. Leadership in Africa has long been cloaked in fear. Threats, sanctions, coups, and assassinations have enforced compliance. But survival and documentation change the equation. When leaders witness proof, radar data, missile fragments, communications intercepts, they understand that resistance is possible, that sovereignty can be defended, and that defiance is no longer theoretical. The initiative's 12 nations serve as a living example. Mali, Niger, Chad, Guinea, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, Tanzania, Central African Republic, Sudan, Mauritania, Congo, Equatorial Guinea. Each stands not just for itself, but for the collective credibility and power of African leadership. Shared intelligence ensures that plots against one nation are foiled collectively. Economic resilience shields member states from coercion.